I never intended to challenge the core principles of architectural history. That's not who I am. I accepted everything I'd been taught, that human technological advancement followed a linear path, that every generation built upon the previous one's achievements, and that our modern grasp of electricity and energy distribution represented humanity's greatest accomplishment. Then I found myself standing underneath a 19th century courthouse dome in Indiana, and things stopped making sense. Above me, this copper-covered dome rose like a mountain, its surface transformed by oxidation into that characteristic green finish. Metal spires projected from each corner, topped with spherical ornaments and sharp finials that appeared to reach skyward with calculated purpose. The whole building hummed, not in some poetic sense, but it literally vibrated at a frequency I could sense in my chest cavity. The standard explanation claimed these were decorative features common to the Beaux-Arts style. But that word, decorative, stuck with me because nothing about this structure felt merely ornamental. Each component appeared crafted with engineering precision, bordering on fanaticism. The metal alloys weren't selected randomly. The geometric dimensions weren't just aesthetic decisions, and the arrangement of conductive materials along particular routes throughout the building wasn't accidental. As I dug deeper, the conventional explanation started falling apart. Let me demonstrate what I discovered. Consider the dome itself. Not just any dome, but this particular architectural design that shows up with disturbing consistency across 6 continents. In St. Petersburg, Russia, you'll find enormous copper domes crowning major government structures, each one topped with golden spires ending in conductive points. Melbourne, Australia displays identical design concepts, the same metal combinations, the same geometric relationships. San Francisco, Buenos Aires, Budapest, Kolkata. The pattern keeps repeating itself. These aren't just comparable buildings. They're essentially the same structure, constructed following identical specifications, utilizing identical materials, and adhering to identical mathematical principles. The domes aren't simply copper sheets shaped by hammering. They're sophisticated layered systems with copper on the exterior, frequently featuring gold leaf or gilding at particular locations, iron frameworks underneath, and stone foundations extending incredibly deep into the ground, far deeper than structural requirements would dictate. Consider this. Why would an Indiana courthouse need a foundation descending 40 feet into bedrock? Why would a Tasmanian government building require 3 distinct metal layers in its dome? Why would all these structures, supposedly designed by different architects in different nations with no communication between them, employ precisely the same proportions? The standard explanation fails here. We're told these resulted from architectural trends, that the Beaux-Arts movement simply spread globally. But trends don't determine engineering specifications, don't require specific metal alloys, and don't mandate that every building be positioned at exact distances from water sources, or that foundations must reach certain depths regardless of ground conditions. Once you notice it, there's no going back. Let me walk you through these components, not from an architect's perspective, but as an electrical engineer might view them. The domes are copper, which is an excellent electrical conductor, second only to silver. These aren't ornamental caps. They're enormous conductive surfaces positioned at each structure's highest point. That patina forming on them is copper oxide, which actually enhances certain conductive properties over time. Many domes show signs of gold or gilt application at the peak, precisely where you'd place a lightning rod on contemporary buildings. Gold is a superior conductor, doesn't oxidize, and lasts forever. The spires are metal rods extending from corners and central locations, frequently ending in spheres or pointed tips. Official explanations call them finials, decorative touches. But look at their construction. Solid metal cores, often running deep into the structure itself, connected to metal frameworks webbing throughout the entire building, positioned at cardinal directions with geometric accuracy. These aren't decorations. They're antennas, collectors, and conductors. The stone, limestone, granite, marble, all selected for specific properties beyond appearance. Limestone contains calcite, a piezoelectric material generating electrical charge under pressure. Granite contains quartz crystals capable of storing and releasing energy. The stones weren't chosen randomly. They're engineered components selected for properties we've learned to overlook. The metals include brass doorknobs, bronze fixtures, copper gutters, and downspouts running to foundation depths, iron railings connected to bronze elements through careful joinery, and aluminum details that shouldn't even exist. Aluminum was rarer than gold during the 19th century, yet these buildings are covered with it. And consistently, these metals connect, forming pathways and circuits. The pattern becomes undeniable when you map it out. The conductive elements don't exist separately. They connect dome to spire, spire to railing, railing to foundation, foundation to earth, foundation to water. One continuous conductive pathway from sky to ground, engineered with precision our ancestors supposedly lacked. These buildings aren't just constructed with conductive materials. They're built according to specific geometric ratios. The golden ratio constantly appears in dome heights relative to base widths, in spire spacing, in window-to-wall proportions. Fibonacci sequences show up in architectural element placement, along with sacred geometry that ancient cultures claimed could harness and direct energy. The Parthenon, the pyramids, Gothic cathedrals, and now these 19th century civic buildings, all following identical mathematical principles, all incorporating identical geometric relationships, all using identical resonant frequencies in their spatial proportions. Modern architects claim this is about aesthetics, beauty, and classical revival. But beauty doesn't require millimeter-level mathematical precision, doesn't demand every angle be calculated to fractions of a degree, and doesn't necessitate the entire structure resonating at specific frequencies when wind flows through its corridors. These buildings hum and vibrate, responding to atmospheric conditions. Stand inside one during a thunderstorm, and you'll feel it in your bones. The entire structure seems to come alive, to conduct and channel something through its framework from sky to earth. Why? This is where official history becomes impossible to maintain. Between 1850 and 1910, these structures appeared worldwide, not gradually or with clear lines of influence, but simultaneously. The same designs, identical materials, identical engineering specifications from San Francisco to St. Petersburg, from Melbourne to Montreal. The pattern repeats with variations so minor, they seem to be working from identical blueprints. The official narrative asks us to believe in coincidence on a global scale, that architects who never met somehow developed identical solutions, that builders working with supposedly primitive tools achieved identical precision, that separate governments funded identical projects without coordination, communication, or any evidence of knowledge transfer. The coordination problem becomes impossible to solve. How do you explain identical metal compositions in buildings separated by oceans? How do you account for the same foundation depths, geometric ratios, and conductive pathways being built simultaneously by cultures that supposedly had no contact? How do you rationalize that these buildings appear to be nodes in a network, positioned at specific intervals and oriented to precise cardinal directions, all without any documented plan or purpose? You can't. not without acknowledging what the evidence is screaming. These buildings were part of a system, a coordinated, engineered, global system designed to accomplish something we've been taught was impossible without copper wires and power plants. And here's the strangest part. After 1910, it stops. Not gradually, but abruptly. The construction of these buildings ceases almost overnight. The engineering specifications vanish from architectural journals. The mathematical principles disappear from textbooks. And the buildings themselves, many were demolished. Others were modernized with their metal components removed. Their domes replaced with modern materials. Their foundations filled in. San Francisco City Hall had its original copper dome removed in 1917, replaced with a steel frame and concrete shell. Dozens of American government buildings had metal spires removed as unnecessary or dangerous. European structures were stripped of conductive elements during restoration projects that destroyed more than they preserved. The official explanations vary. Safety concerns, changing architectural fashions, modernization, progress. But the pattern tells a different story. The demolitions weren't random. They targeted specific building types, those with the most elaborate conductive systems, the deepest foundations, the most precise geometric specifications. And the timing coincides exactly with the rise of centralized electrical power grids, the establishment of power companies, and the transition to wired electrical distribution. This raises a simple but critical question. What if these buildings threatened something? What if their very existence contradicted a new system being implemented? What if they demonstrated a technology being actively replaced? The evidence accumulates with each example examined, and the implications grow harder to dismiss. Let me be clear about what I'm suggesting. These buildings with their copper domes, metal spires, conductive pathways, geometric precision, and impossible foundations weren't designed for the purposes we've been taught. Not primarily. The courthouses, government buildings, and World's Fair pavilions weren't just civic structures. They were infrastructure. Energy infrastructure. The evidence suggests they were designed to channel, store, and transmit electrical energy without wires. The domes as collectors gathering atmospheric electricity, lightning, and electromagnetic fields from the ionosphere. The spires as receivers and transmitters positioned at cardinal points to create a directional system. The metal pathways as conductors moving energy through the structure. The stone foundations as capacitors storing charge in piezoelectric and crystalline matrices. The geometric precision creating resonant frequencies that amplified and focused the energy. A wireless energy system, global, coordinated, functional, and then erased. Not destroyed completely, as that would be too obvious. Instead, redefined. The buildings remain, but their purpose has been buried beneath layers of historical revision. We're taught their beautiful, historic architectural achievements, told the metals are decorative, the geometry is aesthetic, the engineering is primitive. We're shown construction photographs and told to believe in scaffolding and horsepower and human labor achieving what would challenge our modern capabilities. The silence is deafening. No debate about the transition from this supposed system to wired electricity. No discussion of why thousands of precisely engineered buildings suddenly became obsolete. No explanation for how decorative elements that cost fortunes to install became expendable overnight. Just a quiet rewriting of history that left the buildings standing as monuments to a past we can see, but are taught not to understand. When you search for primary sources, the gaps become obvious. Construction records are vague or missing. We have elaborate documentation of far less significant buildings, but these massive structures appear in the historical record almost fully formed. Foundation diagrams are rarely preserved. Original architectural specifications were lost in fires, floods, or simply misplaced. The engineering journals from this period discuss the buildings in terms so generic they could describe any structure. What we do have are photographs, thousands of photographs showing these buildings under construction. And in those photographs, something extraordinary appears. These massive structures being built with remarkably little visible machinery, small crews, simple scaffolding, and no evidence of the enormous industrial effort that should have been required. It's as if they were being assembled, not built. Assembled from components manufactured elsewhere according to specifications that pre-existed the projects themselves. Components designed to fit together in precise ways to create specific systems. And when the systems were no longer needed or wanted, the components were removed and the buildings were redefined. I stand again beneath that Indiana dome, the copper surface above me green with age, the spires reaching toward clouds, the metal pathways running through walls I can't see but can somehow feel, like a current just beneath perception. And I'm left with questions that official history cannot answer. Why did humanity build these structures with such precision, coordination, and identical purpose across the entire globe? Why did they stop so abruptly? Why were the conductive elements removed? Why has the engineering knowledge behind them been so thoroughly forgotten? What did these buildings actually do? Not what were they used for after being redefined as civic structures, but what were they engineered to do originally? What technology did they embody? What system did they serve? And perhaps most unsettling, who decided this system should end? Who coordinated its dismantling? Who rewrote the history? And why has no one questioned the narrative we've inherited? A narrative telling us our ancestors built magnificent energy infrastructure as decoration, then forgot how they did it. The deeper I've gone into this investigation, the more I've realized we didn't invent electrical power distribution. We replaced it. We replaced a system we can still see in the architecture around us with a system requiring copper wires, power plants, and centralized control. We replaced something that was free, distributed, and already built with something that could be owned, metered, and sold. And then we forgot, or we were made to forget. The buildings remain as silent witnesses to a technology we've been taught never existed. Their domes still gleaming, their spires still reaching, their foundations still extending deep into the earth, connecting to aquifers and bedrock in ways we're told are meaningless. But once you see it, once you understand the pattern, the precision, the impossible global coordination, you can't unsee it. These buildings were designed to conduct electricity, the knowledge was erased, and the evidence is hiding in plain sight in every courthouse square, in every government building, in every structure crowned with copper and bristling with metal spires that we pass every day without seeing what they truly are. Ask yourself, what else have we forgotten? What other technologies are hiding in our architecture, infrastructure, and the buildings we've inherited but no longer understand? The answers are there in the metal, in the stone, in the geometric precision of structures built according to specifications we've lost. We just have to remember how to see them. Where are you watching this video from? Write in the comments which city or country you are from. We would love to know who is watching with us. Share your thoughts, observations, or questions. Every comment is important. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Together, we are creating a community of curious explorers.